better why this is such a treat for me to be here. Madam Former President, and there was a reason for you to be here because of parents and past experiences that made your service here more meaningful. Well, I'm here to inform you on some things, hopefully to inspire you toward a bigger vision for each of us, a bigger vision for Civitan, a bigger vision for Birmingham and Alabama, with a focus on the next couple of years before the World Games. But I want to remind you that you are probably more powerful or impactful than you even think. And I'd like you to be thinking about this most of my life has been around being inspired from selling Bibles back as a college student and all that, John, Reverend John. Been focused on the common denominators of doing our best, teaching professionals and students, folks like us. So during this and sharing some information, I'd like you to also invite you to please be thinking about what impact would you like to have in life, what's your purpose, your callings, gifts, and talents, and perhaps what you would like to do through Civitan as well. But I want to give you, I can prove that you have probably more impact than you think. This book that has a picture of President Reagan and Raymond Weeks, a Civitan member, on the cover when he was at the White House receiving the Presidential Citizens Medal in 1982, and was called the driving force for America's Veterans Day, based in Birmingham, Alabama. I wrote that with retired Colonel Stretch Dunn, West Point graduate, retired colonel who moved to Birmingham in Alabama, in part because he felt at home here, the people were nice to veterans, it was a patriotic place. By the way, he passed away a couple of years ago. But you were partly responsible for this book. And this is my theory. I went to Gresham Junior High in the Cahaba Heights area. Moved there from Barry in the 9th grade. And here's my theory. Those of you, I've heard several of you talking about Alabama, and your great football program, and the idea about having a process. Okay. If you're a true fan, you believe in process. In fact, Colonel Dunn and I wrote in this other book, this is his book, see all the tabs in it, Professionalism Under Stress, that the next generation of leadership will include a lot of the things of the past, like management by walking around and being a good person and all that good stuff, which is really true, but by putting processes and systems in place that reward good people to do the right things automatically. Civitan was responsible for helping Gresham Junior High do that. Because of you, or Civitan, there was a citizenship speech competition offered to the school. So because of Civitan's influence and the school saying yes, the civics teacher assigned all of us an essay. And I remember writing an essay because of you, through her, and I wrote about freedom as a 14-year-old. By the way, I was writing about freedom for the first time in my life. Colonel Dunn was 24 years old, was in Vietnam fighting for it. We didn't realize the connection until after 9/11 we came back together. But what happened is that I was asked to write the essay and wrote it. She asked me to speak in front of the school. One of my first speeches, I think I looked at my feet the entire time. And then she said, we'd like you to be one of the contestants for the Civitan citizenship speech competition. Boy, going down there and seeing all these judges standing in front of us and having a chance to stand and deliver. It all became because you guys set that up. You said, somebody did back then, I believe, that you wanted to perpetuate citizenship and you wanted students to think about that. So that was a system that was put in place, I think, because of Civitan and influenced the school, and because of that, this 14-year-old was writing about it. Of course, I don't know this, but I have a hunch that your influence lasted longer. Because after my whole life, anybody who knew me prior to 1991, or 2001, knew that it was focused on planning and leading in life. I created the Personal Leadership Association, and we were about helping people with that. Adults, students, Civitan members, we did that with the governors-elect right back in 98. Because that's one of the things you do. If you value doing your best, you do that. It's non-negotiable. That is a principle. But if something happened after, it was a little bit extra after the 9/11 attacks. And a fellow member of Life Leaders, Colonel Dunn, and I, we genuinely asked ourselves, what can we do for our country now? he thought about re-enlisting even though he was married, and I tried to join the National Guard, and they told me I was too old. That was an interesting conversation. I literally said, as an athlete in high school, I thought I was being a little cocky, and I was trying to show a little bravado, and I said, all right. He said, I was over, the old age was 41. I said, what 41-year-old do I have to wrestle to show you I can do what's needed? And that's inspiring, sir. But you're still too old. Well, something happened, and after that, we wrote, the book about common denominators for being a true professional in military and civilian life. Losing lessons from combat, college, and corporate teachings and living. And over time, we started writing about patriotism and roots of honor, and then I discovered, I'm going to add to the book something about the veterans, the patriotic holidays. And I go online and I said, let me look up Veterans Day. That's coming up. And I was excited and angry when I found out that Veterans Day started in Birmingham, because it was less than 5 miles from where I went to high school, and I had never heard that. And this is a true, honest statement. I was born in Birmingham, and I had this thought, boy, that's great news. And then I thought, there we go again, shooting ourselves in the foot by doing nothing about it, right? Just like with Mr. Gasson's Motel and all the other stuff where those are opportunities. Well, this happened, and we wrote the book, and we designed Veterans Day posters and started participating in Veterans Day. And in 2005 and 2006, we actually started, please look at your program, it's in your table. I'm pleased to know Mr. Raymond Weeks, a Civitan member, actually started this. And we were fortunate to add the first ever event added to the normal 2-day tradition. We added a tribute to the founder on the 10th, typically, to help kick off Veterans Day. And I don't know how many of you know that there's a monument to Civitan member Raymond Weeks in Lynn Park. In Lynn Park. Between the entrance to City Hall and straight over to the entrance of Boutwell Auditorium on that corner, there's an obelisk about this high that's from a grateful nation that was put there a few years after he died. And you will see in that program, there's a picture of him, there's a picture of him going to see Eisenhower, and then the picture that's on the cover of this book from Reagan. So, there was something I think that was stirring perhaps because of being inspired and challenged to write about citizenship and freedom and patriotism and character traits as a 14-year-old when I really didn't understand much about what they were, because I think that had something to do with it when all of this happened. That actually resulted in, now what are we going to do about it? And part of good citizenship means writing the books and doing a few other things. So, this book, Terry, thanks for the video from my mom, is basically to Civitan and to Terry, thanks for sponsoring the citizenship essay and speech competition that influenced me 50 years ago. David, I appreciate all of you. Now, I'm asking you, what are you thinking right now in terms of what might you could do tomorrow or this year that might influence people that tomorrow or this year or maybe 50 years from now? And there's a couple things I'd like to share with you which might inspire Civitan to up its game with us to try to do even more. But I want to make sure you understand a few things. They're like me, they're from Birmingham. Did not know, like me, that Veterans Day actually started here. So let me hit a few highlights with you. Raymond Weeks came back from World War II in 1945 and looked around, and there was nothing going on around then Armistice Day, and there was no, and even then that only honored people from the previous war. And he had the idea there should be a National Veterans Day. It should honor veterans of all wars, and the next year took action. Now let me clarify. How many of you have heard that there are character traits mandated to teach in Alabama schools? I hadn't heard that either. 1995, 25 character traits were listed and mandated to be taught for a minimum of 10 minutes per day, including the Pledge of Allegiance. It was done by the legislature. Some do it, some don't, but most of us have not even heard about it. One of the character traits in this story is patriotism. Raymond Weeks cared enough about his love of country and service to want to create a national holiday. Second one's courage. You think about this if you've got kids or grandkids or in your own life where you have a big idea and you're not sure if you want to do it or not because you might fail. had the courage to go to the future President of the United States, the Pentagon, to present that there should be a National Veterans Day, and we want it to happen in Birmingham, Alabama. Well, that was in 1946, and it took until 1954 when President Eisenhower signed it into law. So perseverance is the third character trait in this story. The fourth one is loyalty. He served it for 40 years of his life until he could no longer serve, and thus from a grateful nation is down there. And the fifth is citizenship. Presidential Citizens Medal from the President of the United States. This, by the way, this is going to prove important in about 30 seconds. Only 3 people on the stage: the President of the United States and 2 guests, Raymond Weeks and his wife. National television, full speech, about 20 minutes. The week leading up to the dedication of the Vietnam Wall, and he presented this medal and called him the driving force for America's Veterans Day. Okay. This is one of the national distinctions of Birmingham, Alabama, a national contribution that happened here. It represents freedom of liberty. The fact that our veterans won World War II is part of the reason that we had a civil rights movement, because if Hitler was in charge, I'm not so sure we would have had one. So freedom of liberty led in part to freedom of rights. And because of that, students, to each of us, now we have freedom of significance. We have freedom to flourish in our own lives because we have liberty and because we have rights. Does that make sense? Well, the veterans and other patriots came to us in 2012 and said, we need some help, Doc. It's not being taught in the schools. Well, how many people know about it? Well, maybe 20% or so around Birmingham, but most people just know about the parade. They don't know it started here. They don't know the history behind it. They don't know about all the great stuff that happened. What about across Alabama? Maybe 2%. What about the country? Less than 1%. So what does it mean? We are losing, or have been losing since 1947, a power, because somebody didn't put a process in place for kids to learn every year, at least in one class, at least one. And in most every school in Alabama has a Veterans Day event, but rarely does it mention the who, where, and when. Where did it start and by who? Now, why is that important? Well, 2 things. At the esoteric side, we've been losing a great opportunity to motivate kids from Birmingham and Alabama that this is somebody like you and me. If you got a big idea, go for it, right? And subsequently, we've been losing an opportunity to teach character and inspiration and personal leadership and achievement. But what are we also losing? National branding, tourism, commerce, and events. Now, would you think that most veterans and other patriotic groups, if they knew this, would probably at least consider coming to Birmingham every year or every few years, or at least come one time because of its significance? Now, how many percent of the people across America know this? What did I say? 1%. All right, it gets worse, but there's a principle here. All right, I was called. Maybe you were the reason, Civitan was probably the reason they put a burr in my saddle that this is one of my bucket list goals. I'm tired of talking about it, and the people whose job it is to do it didn't seem to really want to care. I mean, I was calling the director of tourism. He said, "Man, that's a good idea. Keep up the good work." No kidding. So I go down in 2012. I do this for about 2 or 3 weeks. I go see the superintendent of education before he starts his job. We're going to do that. I asked him to help me do 2 things. Get a lesson plan for Veterans Day founding in Alabama. He said, "We'll do that." And the second part will just help our kids write a plan for school and life while they're in school. He said, "Well, that's a really good one. That's going to take a while." So I got 1 out of 2. Then I had this expiring, bang on the table meeting with some folks from the governor's office and Veterans Affairs and tourism there. And then terrible news came. It ended up being good news. The terrible news was we're going to have a hard time getting the governor to sign that proclamation because I just found a resolution online. This guy shows me that the United States Congress said that Veterans Day started in Kansas. What? Teach your kids, teach us. It's one thing to do it, it's one thing to own it, it's one thing to be it. But if you want to stand for something and have an opportunity to attract more people to want to be with you because they know what you stand for, you'd better tell the story, Mr. VP for marketing over here. because we had lost the war on education, and Emporia, Kansas probably didn't know any better, and a congressman went there in early 2000s and got it passed. And no one from Alabama, the senator, or the Congress would admit to know anything about it. But here's the facts. They did have the idea in 1953, launched in 54, but we'd already been doing it for 7 years. For 7 years. So the terrible news became great news. My 3-week, I'm going to get this done, it took me an entire year. Because we had wrote a book, did posters, had to go to the governor, the mayor, and eventually to the United States Senate with a lot of people helping, and they finally passed a resolution. Right about Veterans Day time, I got a call from the senator from Alabama that said, we've got good news. We passed it, which gave Alabama and Birmingham and Raymond Weeks the recognition for the longest running Veterans Day in the United States of America. So, passed the resolution, but all that really did is about another couple thousand people knew it. Now we have to implement. So how do we do that? You got to think systems, leadership, putting systems and processes in place. And my best strategy on this is that the only way we're going to be successful is that if every student in Alabama learns it while he or she is in school. And it's a simple strategy. You teach it at least in 1 year, and then you mention it at every event that you have, right? And then the governor should have a branding strategy. We don't have a strategy for Alabama yet, a brand. We don't have one for Birmingham yet. What is a brand for Civitan? I'm going to encourage you seriously as leaders to develop one. I thought when I was 14 years old that it was citizenship, that you were the worldwide leader in standing for and educating about citizenship. And maybe you are, maybe you have been, but I think you can even do more of that going forward. Does that make sense to anybody besides me? Well, I mentioned their character traits. There was a couple. I want to share a vision going forward and see if you are interested, and hopefully we can have some interaction about it. Doing this work and research, I found out that in 95 there are 25 character traits mandated. I mentioned 5 of them. There's some others that definitely should be on the list that are not. But there's some people now that are asking life leaders and me what we can do because they're not unhappy with basically citizenship preparation. We're not teaching character traits. In some schools they do a good job, in others it's being read over the loudspeaker during homeroom while the homeroom teacher's calling roll or doing something else. Not a way to really internalize all that, is it? Well, the idea here is that we're making a proposal now. We do a couple of things. We want to do a pilot. We're going to have a lot of online resources, but we want National Veterans Day, Freedom of Liberty to be taught in all of our schools and state with a connection to the Civil Rights Movement. Those character traits all fit. Liberty, rights, now freedom. Now to do that, you say, Mom, Dad, how exactly do I do that? You keep telling me to do my best, but how exactly do I do that? And if your answer is work hard and have a good attitude, you're absolutely right, but you better up your game on your answer. And in student development literature, when I was selling Bibles, John, I learned this and came back, but also even in doctoral studies. Helping people to write a plan that helps them to think about, ask about, and answer, what is my purpose? What's my mission, vision, goals? What am I going to do? Priorities, what am I going to do about it? That we're more likely to be motivated if we don't. Does that make sense? Would a student in school that has goals or something written on a page or 2 or 3, over time, would you like to have more motivation or less? You would think so, right? And I can prove this to you on another day if you'd like, but I've done an assessment of attitude and ability in Alabama amongst the professionals and the students that I've surveyed in seminars and beyond. The average person gives themselves a C average when it comes to commitment and confidence and courage. And the number one correlation is whether or not they have callings and choices, which basically means I've asked the question and tried to answer what are my callings and what are my choices in the form of a plan. So if you want to help somebody as a parent or as a civic leader or in any other place, help those individuals have a page or 2 plan about mission and goals and why am I here and what inspires me to get up every day, and help them to do that and how it relates to the mission and values of your organization. If you do that, you increase the probability that they will do better, and so will your organization. Okay. So if we can teach Veterans Day related to civil rights and the freedoms and the character traits in schools, then here's another thing that we can maybe brand Alabama for before the World Games. Who knows the World Games are coming? 2021. All right. What's the branding statement likely to be? Media, if they come check our websites and past history and videos, what's it likely to be? When I visited Washington State and worked out there for about a year, about 10 years ago, this is what I got. Y'all are great at football and bad at civil rights. And I didn't help our state when he said, do people, everybody down there pick cotton? And I said, well, that was my first job on my grandfather's farm. And they said, yeah. Do you have running water? I'm seriously got to ask him if everybody had running water and all of those kinds of stories. But we could turn that around, I think, if we prepare the media, prepare our citizens through our students as well as the organizations, including the World Games Organization, about what we stand for. We're the founders of 2 national movements to create a commemoration of freedoms and patriotism in the men and women who have fought for it since the beginning of this country. And also for the commemoration of freedom of rights through the civil rights movement, right? Cradle of Birmingham, you were telling Ms. Bell was here in Birmingham, right? And now we started a new movement to help our students understand not only that they have freedom of significance to do their best, but we're going to teach them how. Well, how are you going to do that? We're emphasizing character traits education in the schools, and we're going to help them to write a plan. But this plan, they're going to write not only what I think my goals for life are, but also maybe a 1 or 2 sentence vision about how I'm going to fulfill each of those character traits, so that they'll internalize it rather than hearing it distracted by 14 other things during homework. Maybe a statement about courage. And I'm going to try even when I'm afraid, right? I'm going to persevere to graduate high school even though I've got some struggles, right? So that's one of the ways that we can influence people and make them better citizens. And if we could do some of that, and therefore, by the way, Alabama's ranked either 43rd or 44th on achievement recently. And this is why I think what citizenship and Civitan can do is so important. I think there are 3 major strategies. I'm going to simplify them. One's legislative funding. They're given as much as they can already. They've been saying it for years. Okay. The teachers were given all the time and our own money and extra time to give it. All right, that's as good as we can get. So where else are we going to go? We go to student development, and we try to instill purpose, priorities, and having a plan that gives them some guidance toward using their time better, but also some sense of hope that they can do what they think they would desire to do. And if we do that, I believe we can get from 44th up to 39 and beyond. And then I've told more than one superintendent this is, and I probably will have to persevere, that within 5 years or so, I look forward to the Wall Street Journal calling you and asking, what are you doing in Alabama that has helped you move up the academic ranks? How many people do you think would like that? Alabamians say we like common sense? I've surveyed alumni and parents. Over 90% say they wish they got this in school. All of them say they wish their kids did. The only city that I know of that has tried to brand for life was Chicago about 5 years ago, and it was done as a political thing, and the mayor was trying to do it. You must have a plan to get your diploma. And that plan was not a written plan like we're talking about. You got to be going in the military or to college or have a job, which is different. So if we can help them to graduate, then they'll be better prepared for using parts of those plans to apply for college and or career, and along the way, they probably are going to have a greater sense of character. Does that make sense to anybody besides me? All right, well, this is about student success, and I'm going to just throw out a couple ideas related to Civitan, and let's talk about not just the principle, maybe what we can do. These are random. I just wrote these this morning. One, if any of this makes sense to you, got 5 minutes? Thank you, sir. That's the goal. We can influence our state on doing these things, and maybe Civitan may want to be a part of that. We've started a website already on teaching character traits, and we're going to make it better. I think citizenship for you might consider teaching and rewarding through competitions or essays or whatever, papers written specifically on character traits rather than broadly. Or if it's gonna be on patriotism, label it as a character trait. The legislators are looking for this, some educators are. That's a thought. I'd read this morning, I got a newsletter from the current mayor that said about the Institute for Civic Engagement. There's a connection there. See, Birmingham and its brand could not only do those freedoms I was talking about, but also we're invested in citizen development and civic work. With your founding here and the other two civic clubs here that are the largest in the world, you could argue in having an Institute for Civic Engagement, you could argue that there's a distinction about Birmingham for that. And then the world media going to Japan and Indonesia and China and all these other places would be writing about those things rather than writing about Bull Connor. What did you say? What did you say? If you don't tell them the plan, somebody will make one for them.
Create the story for you.
If you don't tell the story, they'll create the story. That is very powerful. And so, in terms of a civic club and a city, we've got to do better, I think, in that area. Okay. There's other stuff, but let me just stop here and ask you, what are you thinking, or do you have any thoughts regarding any of this, about what Civitan or you or someone should try to do because of some of the history and the facts and a few goals that I've mentioned to you? We've got about less than 5 minutes. I'd like your participation now, please. What can we do? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to say on 9/11,
Yes, ma'am.
I was teaching preschool in New York City. So I know how this certainty is long overdue. One of the things I noticed when the war began in Iraq is that the children as young as 5 were saying to our soldiers, here comes the Antichrist, here comes the Satan, the Satanist, or whatever they were calling us. And as a preschool teacher, I felt if they were being prepared by Saddam Hussein that we were the great Satan, that it was my duty and the duty of educators to prepare our preschoolers to know that they should love the country. And on 9/11, most of my children were children of parents who had not been born in America. So I found myself teaching children of foreigners to love America. So when this happened, it was like, I felt helpless. I felt like I just told them that we were great, and one little 4-year-old came and said, don't worry, Miss Bell, we're gonna get her.
All right. Your club president and I have been talking about possibilities. So inspire him with maybe goals that you think should be possible and or considered for Civitan. Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking, we have Clergy Appreciation Month. We could, like in November, do like a Veterans Appreciation Month, and just bring a veteran to your club and let them speak, let them be heard, and then and then that also with the junior Civitan program. That's probably I just don't think patriotism is taught. We say the pledge and everything else, but I come from 3 generations of people who had served. My great-grandfather served, my grandfather served in the First World War, and my father served in the Second World War. And yet, the following generations, the percentage of those that serve keeps going down, and so now there's no culture of service because of the volunteer army. It's like you're not called, trained, and then sent back to your community. You have to decide you want to do that, and fewer and fewer people are doing it.
That's a good point. And if you can include, that started here, the commemoration too, that would add to the appreciation of the veterans from Alabama. And we're going to first on this. Go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was speaking with this gentleman. He was saying that the Civitan had done the cruise, and my dad is 97 years old, and he is a World War II veteran. And on the cruise, they had a dedication to all of the veterans, and it meant so much to him. It was like, oh, all of this was done just for him. And he was congratulated by people and everything. So it was really meaningful that was made an occasion, and giving a lot of recognition to all of the servicemen there. It was really memorable, especially for me.
Thank you. Got an idea?
Yeah, I think if we're called the Magic City, you've got to link patriotism and civil rights to magic. Why are we magic? That's why.
Well, I think that when you get to the historical aspect of Birmingham, believe me, I believe it's it's greater than just magic, it's really divine.
That's right.
Because we were, it's really divine to me that Birmingham was chosen. You know, that kind of correlates with the scripture. Whereas, how do you expect something good to come out of Birmingham? Because we were considered the worst. That was one of the reasons why Dr. King chose Birmingham when Reverend Shuttlesworth said, "You're looking for a place that's out of whack and completely off the Richter scale. Birmingham is the place." So, but really, what's so special from the historical standpoint is that we divinely were chosen to as nothing, and we became really leaders of the world, not just the nation. People all over the world really looked to Birmingham. How did you do it? How did you put your fighting down and trying to come together for the good of humanity? To me, it's like we were chosen by a power higher than ourselves to be used for not just the nation, but for the world. And that's
Right.
a lot bigger than magic. I think the magic came from the iron or whatever,
Right.
but it's much more spectacular, you know.
As you get maybe our last idea, I'm gonna route around if you wanna see it. I can give you this. This is a front page summary of the history and character traits related. There's a great handout for your event or school. I'm gonna pass that around. And this is a first draft of a working piece that I just summarized about the bigger branding that includes history and character traits. Anybody got an idea? Don't you have to have an idea for the new guy?
I think the idea is that have us to keep talking.
Keep talking?
And talk out.
Well,
like,
there,
yeah. It's the passion.
A
and
lot of the
honestly, yeah.
kids, I went to Ramsey and Jackson, Olin and Parker a couple years ago and taught some of this to them. And I asked them on a survey which they liked in terms of, about half of them like Magic City. Some of them liked the idea of, we've got Steel City, Magic City, and others, but even like Freedom City. As not to replace Magic City, but as an option to be added. We can still say Steel City as an Oldsmobile, for example. We can be Freedom City too. Any other ideas for Civitan to consider?
I was a counselor for many years, and most recently for a boot camp program. And I must say, we were a counseling center that took all of the kids from the district who had created some offenses. And the response of the discipline through the boot camp program was very much helpful in the school system to be a deterrent from kids getting in trouble. And I think if we correlate that with joining the armed services and love for your country and all of that, because it really helped a lot of kids. It deterred them from going back to school, getting in trouble, especially when they had to meet the sergeant when they came back. So if we could incorporate that, and I'm looking at this, my ears hear the cry of children and the call throughout the world for peace, guidance, progress, and unity. I mean, it's right there. Thank you.
If you can connect, if citizenship is part of your mission, if you can connect that to character traits, and the reason I say we all know that we're preparing citizens, right? And if you want to be a city leader and a worldwide leader, you've got a need, right? And second, the state is asking for help on character traits, not only education, but internalization and development. So if we teach these national, one thing that we can do is not just teach character traits from out-of-state companies like we have been. We can teach those, but we can also teach some of the traits that are related to national movements that took place and were led by Alabamians and or within Alabama. And along the way, part of good citizenship, I think, in character is how do we do that? And there's a whole nother program on this, but people who have a sense of purpose are much more likely to do good things and much less likely to get themselves in significant trouble over time. Or if they do, they're more likely to bounce back and that sort of thing. So through our schools and our civic clubs and our communities, if we can, through our institutions, from community groups to churches and like, take action, put processes in place, all the guys say roll tide. Then we are then able to help people. Well, I'm more able to. I went there. Then we're more likely to help those individuals to understand their purpose and their priorities and have plans and perpetuate that character trait, perseverance. Listen, I'd love to talk with you individually. Terry, thank you for the invitation to get a chance to be with you, John, and meet all of you today. Please consider these thoughts and maybe we can work together some more. All right? Thank you very much.